Hey guys, what's going on? If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome. I hope you're all doing well. Even if you aren't, hopefully after watching some of today's titles, you will. It's been quite a journey so far. We've covered quite a couple of titles. I am learning quite a little bit more about my taste and what sort of speaks to me when I actually pay attention to what I'm watching. Got a lot to say, so I'm gonna just cut the jamma and get straight into it. The first anime that I enjoyed recently was Killing Bites. A quick disclaimer saying that this one is pretty violent and graphic, and this one's not afraid of getting a little bit dirty with the gore. It's set in present day in the Japanese underworld, where genetically modified humans battle it out in underground fight rings. These modified humans represent different gangs in the underworld and take part in tournaments that sort of double as social gatherings and also ways to assert gang territory. These players come with a range of abilities from the animal kingdom. The genetic modification also occurs across different species, so for example you would have a girl that actually had her genetics combined with a cheetah. As you would imagine, she would have all these traits that are associated with a cheetah, and she can actually activate her abilities to look like one too. She also has a brother who did something similar with a tiger, also producing very similar results. All these different species end up coming together and having this massive battle royale. This show was super action-packed. It came out in 2013, so even though it lasts for only a very brief 12 episodes, I found that the illustrators actually did a really good job of packaging this whole trope of mutants, of humans being genetically modified and having these supercharged abilities really well, even though this is a trope that we are very familiar with. It takes the best elements out of YA franchises like The Hunger Games, and of course it's extremely reminiscent of the X-Men. While this is not the most intellectually stimulating, it is a great display of fight scenes and animation styles, while being strangely educational because of all the strange facts about the animal kingdom that you end up indirectly learning from these characters' abilities. I went through this one pretty quickly, and while it does lack a little bit on the emotional intensity front, it makes up for it with pure, unabashed, unadulterated fun. While we are on the topic of animals in anime, the recent 2021 release of Odd Taxi was also a title that stood out to me of the bunch that I watched. While furry anime like Beastars have gotten a little bit of a reputation being associated with certain preferences, I promise that this one sticks strictly to the genres of mystery and crime. Odd Taxi centers around Kotogawa, a 40-something-year-old taxi driver who is extremely introverted. The series explores his various interactions with passengers throughout Tokyo City and progresses to him being involved with the disappearance of a girl that is tied to the Japanese underworld. The styling of this series is pretty unique, and while the visuals may remind you a little bit of Disney's Zootopia, coupled with thoughtful animation and music choices, it actually does transport you to this slightly aloof and warped version of the world we know today. Let me use two of my favorite characters as examples. The first being Miho Shirakawa, a middle-aged female llama who works as a nurse in the clinic that Kotogawa goes to for treatment. She's also incredibly talented at capoeira, a Brazilian martial art, and isn't afraid of showing it. Another character I love is one of the heads of a gang, who simply goes by Yano. He is heavily involved in the music industry, doubling it as a means of money laundering and also running large-scale scams. Oh, and he also speaks exclusively in rap, which is insanely entertaining. In all seriousness though, Odd Taxi is a standout piece for me. At a brief 13 episodes, the team that has worked on this has managed to touch on some pretty heavy themes, like corruption, childhood trauma and abuse, and even the pitfalls of social media. It was great food for thought, and you can tell that the plot was solid all the way through to the end of the series. I would say this is definitely among my top picks for releases in the spring 2021 season. Now, I do have a slight bias towards horror, as you may or may not have noticed. And while I love a good jump scare, there's something to be said about delicately crafted horror that's made with intention and created with the sole purpose of searing, terrifying images in our minds and keeping us awake at night. In comes Shiki. This anime was adopted from a short novel that was released in 2010 and is set in a small village in rural Japan, and it's intense. A mysterious disease starts to afflict many of the villagers. leaving the local doctor puzzled, and he also happens to be childhood friends with a priest from the local temple. As the condition starts to spread and worsen, both these characters begin to suspect that there is more to what's happening than meets the eye. As villagers begin to pass away one by one, it becomes very apparent that this is a very serious problem, and not just to be dismissed as any common cold. While the local authorities try to cushion this information by filtering out important details from the media, tension begins to build up steadily, alongside the development of the different characters in the show. We start to see confusion creep into the minds of the villagers as their deceased ones begin to return one by one, but not quite the same as they were before. These beings were eventually labeled as the Shiki. The plot thickens as we begin to see the seeds of mass hysteria beginning to bear fruit as social divides start to escalate to acts of extreme violence and conflict. While not giving away too much, the imagery and duality of this series is very well thought out. Post-apocalyptic themes are executed with a great sense of timing, and the tool of half episodes are used incredibly well to illustrate the juxtaposition between the two opposing tribes. For those of you that aren't familiar, half episodes are a tool that are commonly used in anime to sort of break up the pace. This tends to be seen in slightly older animes because prior to the mid-2000s, anime was released on an annual schedule, meaning that series will be renewed and released once a year. However, in recent years, anime production in Japan has shifted more towards a seasonal timeline, meaning the annual production year would be broken up into quarters of 3 months each, hence us having spring 2021 anime releases and also summer 2021 anime releases. This change means that manga artists, aka mangaka, can have a more spaced out schedule and not have to use tools such as half episodes to sort of buy time in between the drawing and the release of the manga as well as the release of the anime, when these two elements are put out in public side by side. But Shiki does use the tool of half episodes really well to illustrate the grim details of what's going on underneath the surface of this conflict, not just with humans but also with the Shiki. This chilling tale throws us into a realm of chaos, boarded up by the trappings of small-town superstition. As it comes full circle, it becomes more apparent than ever that the true horror of our time isn't the monsters that lurk in the dark, but in the humans that we see every day. On a lighter note, if that doesn't scare you, the hairstyles will. This last one is going out to all my gym bros. Dumbbell nan hiro, also known as How Heavy Are the Dumbbells You Lift, is a light-hearted shoujo anime revolving around a group of girls exploring the world of the gym. This is such a heartwarming series. As you can see, the girls actually grow and learn more about nutrition and training, slowly outgrowing conventional notions of what it means to be healthy. The series goes over their experiences, learning more about themselves and fitness at local gym, and does a pretty good job at covering the different aspects of strength training and bodybuilding in just 12 episodes. Look, I know this is coming from probably the most biased source, being quite the gym rat myself, but from gym bros with only the best intention to entering their first strength competition, this series progresses at a pretty decent pace, while still managing to show the importance of consistency and sticking to a routine in the gym and exercise, without it coming across as too mundane or routine to the general audience. I also really liked how one of their teachers from their high school ended up joining them, opening up this conversation to older women who may be a little bit more intimidated about working out and starting to take their health a little bit more seriously. Overall, while this isn't the most intense or physically accurate representation of fitness and bodybuilding, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it paints weight training in a much more positive light, addressing misconceptions like girls getting bulky from lifting weights, or that the ketogenic diet is the be-all end-all. You definitely do not have to be a gym goer to enjoy this one either, but hypothetically speaking, if you are, this one will make you smile. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. And there you go! These were the recent titles that have stuck to me and held on to me really well. Out of all of them, Shiki was the one that was really seared into my mind. Also because horror is generally a pretty difficult genre to produce in the animation medium, but these titles are all worth their salt in their own ways, and there's a pretty decent chance that there's something in it for you. Check them out if you'd like to, and if you wouldn't like to, that's it from me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for choosing to share your time with me as always, and I will see you guys soon.